Hello everyone, Taki here. Today we're going to review the new Elite Dungeons that were discussed in the April Showcase livestream. One of the first things that we learned about was the difficulty settings for these new dungeons. There's going to be a normal and story mode option available to you. Story mode will allow you to run through the exact same dungeon with an easier pace. The mobs will deal roughly 33% less damage in this mode. They showcased a great deal of the environment inside this first dungeon, and I have to say that it looks very impressive. Every room is going to have a unique look to it, and the overall layout is very interesting. This dungeon will have 5 massive rooms in total. Each room is going to be gated, and the monsters inside the room will need to be cleared before you can progress. If you're familiar with bigger MMOs, a lot of this is going to look very similar to you. The mobs will path around corners, and you're going to have to be very strategic with how you pull them to traverse the map. They're also making a rather smart decision to tell the story of this dungeon in a way that is not typically done in Runescape.
So, to bring it to life and tell a little bit of the story, that we want to tell with the Temple of Aminishi through the environment, rather than, having to go up and chat to someone for 5 hours, you could sit around and overhear what's going on as you're going through and fighting these guys.
The next thing that I want to talk about is the looting system. They have utilized the same looting chest from the Sophium Slayer dungeon. Your loot is going to be held while you're completing the dungeon, but if you die, that loot will be taxed. They mentioned that this dungeon is going to release a range of gear, but they specifically mentioned tier 92. Anything from 82 to 92 was also discussed as a possibility. This should ensure that dungeons will not be dead on arrival. I hope that they make some form of a mechanic that encourages you to rerun dungeons to gain charges on your equipment that you obtain from here. This will ensure that there is always a reason to be running these dungeons after they're released. These dungeons can also be run for dungeoneering experience, dungeoneering tokens, and money. Finally, I want to talk about the bosses. They showcased 3 on stream. The first is a simple recoloring of the Claudia NPC with different boss mechanics. The second boss that they showcased is Masuta the Ascended, and he wields kind of a dark looking poleaxe. They showcased a little bit of the boss battle and at least one of his special attacks that was like a purple smoke attack that you have to dodge. The last boss they showcased was the Azure Serpent. This boss is really massive and rather intimidating. They stated that you will not be fighting this boss directly, rather you're going to be fighting the corruption inside his body, and you're going to go through a series of A and B battles where you pull the corruption out of it, and then fight it again when it goes back inside the serpent. The final thing that they discussed was a release window for these dungeons. They stated that the first dungeon will be ready for release at the end of June. Something to note about these dungeons, they have tried to build the engine around being able to turn out these dungeons at a fairly expedited speed. They require environment, models, and simple boss mechanics to get work off the ground. They've already started working on the second dungeon that is planned for release in August. This dungeon will have a sort of Freneskian vibe to it, and will offer an entirely new set of bosses and new rewards. I hope you guys are as pumped as I am for these updates. I've been waiting for something like this for years to enter into Runescape, and I am totally pumped that this is going to be coming in a couple of months. That's it for this one. Until next time, Taki out.